Welcome to Moving the World, the Prologis podcast that dives into the forces moving goods and the world forward. This episode, Chris Caton, head of global strategy at Prologis, chats with logistics expert Harshida Acharya of Fulfillment IQ. They break down how shifting policies are shaking up supply chains and how smart companies are staying ahead. Join us for fast takes, sharp insights, and more. Let's get moving.
Harshida, welcome. What a perfect time to have you. Thanks for making yourself available.
Absolutely. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And Chris, this is going to be such an interesting conversation. Let's get into it.
Totally agree. Let's dive in. So it's a pretty interesting time in supply chains here in May of 2025. But before we get into all that, all that's happening on the ground, maybe you could level set for us. As the year opened in 2025, what were you seeing as the priorities across supply chains?
Yeah, absolutely. Over the last year or so, a lot of companies had already been prepping for and knew that there was a little bit of disruption coming. I don't think anybody could have quite imagined the extent of disruption that was coming. So I would say they were somewhat prepared, but not completely braced for what unfolded over the last few months. What we saw was a lot of companies scrambling to figure out what do we do if the tariffs kind of unfold the way that they initially started out. A lot of fear, panic. We saw some companies just diving headfirst and making decisions on how do we make sure that we are balancing our fulfillment and kind of onshoring rapidly, moving products quicker than they otherwise would have. Um, and in other cases, we saw companies just kind of holding back and saying, this is too much. We're just going to hold off on making any decisions for now. So I think both extremes were very prevalent for us.
Yeah, I think for us, when we were looking at the marketplace and really zooming out over even the last 2 years, customers were deferring decisions as we went from sort of COVID to post COVID and reaching towards a new normal. And it felt like at the beginning of the year, we were beginning to progress towards that new normal, notwithstanding a lot of the things you just described. And so there's really sort of a pre April 2nd and a post April 2nd market landscape. And so now tell me what you're seeing. Tell me what you're hearing. Are we going to have, goods on the shelves over the summer, or are Halloween masks going to come for Christmas? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I love that. I wouldn't expect the same kind of empty shelves situation that we saw over COVID quite yet. What I do think we will see is a lot less choices based on some of the folks and customers that we've spoken to. A lot of them are just holding onto their inventory at ports. Some of them being Vancouver or other ports that have not even entered the U.S. just to try and avoid as many of the trade related. Tariff related duties that they have to basically pay up right now. So it's turned into a little bit of a watch and see type of an operation. The other impact that I'm seeing is just Port of LA, for instance, having to let go of staff because they don't have enough demand. So it's kind of sad to see, the dominoes are kind of impacting so many different folks across the supply chain industry. But I love the point you made about how much volatility there has been. So for everybody that's been on the grounds, we started out with e-commerce booming and doing so well over COVID. We got used to expecting, quick commerce and just 1 2 day fast delivery to then going into we have way too much inventory. What do we do now? So we went from just in time to just in case, too much inventory. Let's liquidate as much as possible to being in a situation now where everyone's just unsure of what to do. Um, if I put on my marketing hat, I think for a lot of businesses, the struggle has been really real given a few developments that have happened.
Boy, we're in just a volatile landscape because I think it's not just at a retailer level, whether it's large scale, mid scale, smaller scale, but it's also just different parts of the country in terms of how you approach West Coast, East Coast, different places in between. So, um, when will it all end?
Ooh, if I had the answer to that one, right? um, I certainly hope that we will see some sort of relief by the end of the year, or at least some sort of stabilization, so the businesses can figure out how to plan better for next year. But from my perspective, I'm seeing a lot of volatility continue. I think in addition to all the volatility, just the number of factors that have increased in terms of planning and input that has to be taken into account for businesses has multiplied. So it's not just a matter of, I have to keep my costs down and sell at a higher price than what I bought the item for. Now they have to think about everything else that goes into it. What technology am I using? What impact does the tariff calculation have? All of the different labor factors, facilities, as well as now AI is in the mix as well, right? So a lot of companies are trying to adapt and adopt with what that means. There's a lot of cost involved in bringing some of those technologies on board as well. So um, my hope is that by the end of the year, we should be in a situation where we can at least predict and plan a little bit better, keeping all of these different factors in mind.
Yeah, I'm remembering all the sort of horror stories of 2020, 2021. There's just a very long tail for this sort of stuff. So, if you were paying close attention, we were hearing about in April, Chinese manufacturers furloughing their employees and just stopping production. And now it would seem one might on the surface conclude, okay, we now have a pause and the economics have really changed on importing. But the reality is the rules still are uncertain and maybe uncertain, like you're saying, for 3, 6 months longer. And then there's the cascading of, well, then you got to, then you start to manufacture and then you start to ship, and shipping can take time. And so, yeah, I think, like you said, I think you hope for it to be sort of resolved by the end of the year. And USMCA is due for renewal next year. So the rules on a relative basis, to say nothing of absolute in some places, could be unsettled for even longer.
Yeah, I mean, if you would take a look at just the tariffs, there is a temporary reduction, but that's only for 90 days. So we still don't even know how that's going to play out. I'm glad that we're not looking at 145% tariffs, but it is still quite a bit higher than where we were at. So we have 10% across the board and 30% that's been negotiated. That's still really, really high. I mean, if you think of, a shoe company or a phone case brand, adding on, 40% to your cost to the end consumer, it won't work.
Yeah, there's a lot of fluidity in costs and how people price and whether they absorb, whether they pass on, and there's a lot of experimentation going on right now, to say nothing of just the rules will continue to evolve as we go from temporary to new permanent terms of trade. Something that I want to do with you is really try to separate, and I think we all are trying to do this, sort of this cycle from the secular change. And so we have a lot of temporary impacts on the supply chain that are going to affect 2025. They may even impact 2026. Um, but as we widen our aperture to the next 2 or 3 years, and we think about what was important to us, prioritizations to supply chains in 2024, so last year, and what might they begin to focus on 2026, 2027, what does that look like? And you raised something earlier, which is really around, look, supply chains are trying to increase their capabilities, increase their speed to market, increase the in stocks, et cetera, but subject to cost management. How, what are the strings folks you think will pull on? Some now, maybe some next year. What are the priorities?
Absolutely. I think we've been seeing this over the last few years, but this is going to continue to increase, which is just squeezing out more efficiency. We see this in terms of not just process improvement, but a lot of automations that are being brought into facilities for augmenting labor as well as adding to the ability to have high velocity type of movements within a facility. I think we will see, along with automations, a huge investment in AI technologies and the ability to use AI for prediction. So for instance, just making sure that your inventory is predicted as well as it could. You're orchestrating your movements within the warehouse itself to a much better degree. So what should my pick path look like based on how what I'm trying to build out right now and what I'm trying to ship out. Things like giving guided advice. So being able to have that chat GPT type of an interaction that feels very natural and is built around logistics use cases, and gives that predictability and the ability to hold hands with a site manager, for instance, and helping them figure out, hey, this is how you should run your shift today, or here's how you should plan for peak. Here are the SKUs that you should focus on, or here's how you should move things around even within your facility to make sure that you are truly optimizing. I think over the next 2 years, that's kind of where I see things shifting, and where I see 3PLs as well as retailers double downing and really taking advantage of what AI can give them.
That's excellent. There's AI can often be sort of jargon that's thrown in to add patina, and you gave two really specific examples. So I sort of want to underline them for folks. And you used a term of art that I want to make sure folks understand. So, number one, you talked about demand planning. So, this is, companies have been doing this 20, 30 years. So, AI is part of the evolution of how demand planning works. I think that's one of the use cases. Then the other is you used a term of art, pick path. Can you just further elaborate that for folks that may not be familiar?
That's a great question. So, for folks that are not super familiar with what happens within a warehouse, I would say um, if you think of a warehouse, there's the three key areas. So there is inbound, outbound, and then storage. The biggest labor intensive process is usually picking the product, packing, and shipping them out. So, as much as possible, warehouse teams try to make themselves efficient in terms of picking. Um, Picking is usually done through some sort of here's a list of items that you need to pick. It can be through an automated a system that gives you the list and exact location of where you should pick from, or it can be paper based picking as well. But in either case, it's really important that the path that you travel is is created to be as optimal as possible, because you want to reduce the amount of time you take to complete your entire pick path, to be able to get orders out quickly. But you also want to reduce just the number of steps you take within the warehouse. So, to make that happen, there's a lot of calculations that happen in the back end. And this is where AI can do a much better job than humans, because, again, it involves crunching a lot of data, thinking through, this is what the order SLA is. Here's where everything is laid out within the warehouse floor. How do I make sure that I combine the two and give you the best path, so you are walking the least but picking the right items, and packaging them in a way that it can get on that truck and get to the end customer's hands as quickly as possible.
That's really helpful. Thank you for that. And as you're walking through that, naturally, I'm thinking about e-commerce. And, we're talking about a marketplace broadly as if it's an individual thing. And the reality is, Prologis has 6,000 customers. There's a wide range. And so for some of these customers, the future is now. Honestly, the future was yesterday. And so we have a lot of customers that are growing now,
Mhm.
a lot of e-commerce customers that are growing now. E-commerce continues to take market share. It's about 20, 25% of our installed base, and continues to grow at multiples of the industry average. And I'd like to know, what are you seeing as the state of the art? So we just talked about sort of warehouse optimization. Really, AI is focused in supply chain, is focused on execution within the facility, and managing labor, getting the best ROI on labor costs. W- What else are you seeing in the e-commerce space?
I think e-commerce space, as much as I'd love more automation, it has there are a lot of barriers in terms of cost, capital, just the way a facility is laid out as well, that don't allow a lot of e-commerce businesses to bring in the automation that would truly help them. However, I think given that there is more of a push and the efficiency squeeze, I think we will see more e-commerce operations trying to invest in maybe not so much the ASRS or the bigger automations that require a much larger setup cost, especially if you already have a facility that you own and you're trying to retrofit. But um, rather, just bringing in things like AMRs, even AGVs that truly just make it easier for folks that are working in the warehouse to be able to operate faster, better, walking less, as I mentioned earlier. I know I throw out a bunch of acronyms there, but maybe I'll call on you to just break down for us, the key automations, and maybe one of the other things that I'd love for you to dive into is um, how these automations are impacting warehouse usage and the amount of space businesses are needing for from Prologis.
Yeah, thanks for that question. So, first off, you're right. And maybe stick with the idea of it. Supply chain is not one single thing; it's a wide dispersion, and we might be able to divide um, into two categories: th- areas where there's a lot of labor and areas where there's not a lot of labor. And so maybe that's e-com and non-e-com.
Mhm.
And so, like I said, 25% of our customers are e-commerce related. And so there's a lot of automation going into how can we serve customers faster, make employees more productive. We really see customers focused on investing in those capabilities. But for that other 75-80% of customers, there's a lot less labor. And it's really focused on, as you're saying, efficiency. And so while you talk about RS, so automated sortation and retrieval systems, these can be massive uh, fixed infrastructure that move product autonomously. It's really powerful, but it's really it's very expensive and it's only applicable in certain use cases as you described. And then AMRs, autonomous mobile robots. An example would be a Kiva system or a Locus system, and the ability to really do some of that walking, like you described, and follow an optimal path. And so again, that's about moving individual items around a logistics facility. And so we see adoption rising quickly there in terms of managing some of that walking as you described. Um, but adoption rates are a little bit lower than people might otherwise perceive because the labor intensity is a little bit lower in the vast majority of logistics facilities. And there's a lot of challenges around the fixed upfront cost, around risk and dependence there. And so, in a lot of cases, labor remains an important solution to supply chain challenges.
Absolutely. I love the point that you made, Chris, because as I think about the realities of warehouses and, just thinking about a lot of businesses that we see out there, they actually don't have automations. They don't even have, the best of the best technologies, and it works perfectly fine. I think it's more of those complex scenarios where need you need to meet your SLAs because it's an e-com operation, or it might be another parameter. That's where you truly need the automation. But most of the facilities actually don't have automation or even the systems that for us folks who are very heads down, just looking at innovations within logistics technology space, we'd come to make ourselves believe that this is rampant, but in reality, it truly is not. And I think that will probably continue. A lot of those spreadsheets or even paper-based operations will continue until they feel that squeeze and the need for operations to improve. So that's a really good call out.
Yeah, it's something we're following pretty closely. So, are there any other secular trends you're thinking about as we really? I mean, I'm really reflecting on the last 5 years. Really are a challenge to tell us what the next 5 years will look like. We've had the pandemic, we've had stockouts, we've had sort of post-COVID normalization. Now we have the trade war and normalizing trade relations with other geographies. And so, I mean, man, I can't imagine what your day to day is like or supply chain logician day to day in terms of just it's been about triage for now half a decade. Um, what other priorities might emerge as let's hope we progress through this period of volatility and we get into a place like you said where policies are clear, supply chain strategists can plan and implement their priorities.
Yeah, one of the things that I truly believe we'll continue to see more and more of is just investment in sustainable um, operations, sustainable technologies. For all of the businesses that do end up surviving this volatile period, I think are the ones that have the ability to rely on their volumes or their scale. And I think sustainability considerations fit perfectly along with the other considerations that they would have for their business. um, I think One of the things that I see Prologis doing an exceptional job of is thinking about and predicting what these would be, and building them out, over time across different facilities. Um, I think the last time I took a look at the stats for just the amount of solar roofs that Prologis has ended up installing across their facilities, it was something incredible. I can't remember the exact number, but it's enough. It's more energy than a whole country would need, or something like that. So maybe give us a bit more of a voiceover on that. I think for a lot of businesses, sustainability is really important to invest in, not just because there are requirements from legislation perspective, but also I think it's something that customers really care about. And for businesses that want to show their customers that they truly are thinking about them, investing in the right sustainable practices and technologies is going to be critical.
Yeah, thanks for asking the question. And I tell you, you framed it just the right way. We're really focused on co-innovating with our customers, delivering them the type of real estate they need for the long term. We have line of sight to a gigawatt of installed solar. So that's important, and our customers are telling us they want more sustainable solutions. It varies widely by geography, but for example, have converted many of our facilities over to LED lighting, which is both cost efficient and just better quality lighting to be able to see what you're doing in the logistics facility. And we're both improving operations as well as the construction of the facilities to innovate alongside our customers. Some of the most leading developments are occurring in Europe, but we also have customer partners in the United States. So rooftop solar is an area of fast growth for us globally, including in the U.S. And I'm excited to see ongoing innovation, particularly in the building material space, to really get at some of the more challenging areas to really make buildings more sustainable. If you had to pick one number or one surprise that you think will emerge over the course of the next year, just that would encapsulate the environment we're in here in 2025, and we will look back at in hindsight and say, "Oh, that was so obvious." Is there something that comes to your mind, things that you're thinking about?
So actually, for this discussion, I looked up some of the research that Prologis does, and you have some incredible thought leadership out there. So kudos to you on that. One of the numbers that really stood out to me was that the 5% number, which is real estate typically accounts for 5% of total supply chain cost, which I thought was really interesting because a lot of companies do obsess over that facility cost, right? But the reality is it's a very small cost compared to the rest of the stack that they have to invest in. And to me, it feels like this is just a way for you to unlock what kind of other efficiencies you can obtain over after investing in that facility. So I think for me, we kind of play in the other larger percentage pool of supply chain cost stack. So I'd say probably the systems tech kind of space is where we play. But there's so much more. There's labor, there's transportation, there's inventory storage. As well as the rest of the stuff that goes into a warehouse, which is the systems and admin and all of those other things. So I thought that was very interesting. I wonder when you and the folks at Prologis interact with end customers, are you finding that they are still, you know, very concerned about that cost factor of a facility, or do they also see it as an investment and think about, how should I get the facility that will help me scale and grow and perhaps bring in some of the automations that can help them either move SKUs faster or just be able to automate or bring automations in some other way.
Yeah, what really sticks out to me is the most forward-thinking customers really embrace the most expensive real estate in logistics real estate. So there's a recognition that pursuing infill locations, Class A facilities, um, help both meet service levels that are always rising and optimize all those other costs. And so we've seen demand be positive this year and over the last several years. And a lot of that has to do with that upgrade cycle, that modernizing the supply chain to meet, the needs of customers today and tomorrow. Um, so, Harshida, I've really enjoyed speaking with you. The thing that strikes me is we're sort of talking about supply chain interrupted here in May and likely June of 2025, which is there's U.S. policies that are changing the relationship with the rest of the world, and that's creating a ton of volatility. And supply chains are super focused on managing that volatility. But the reason why I really wanted to speak with you today is you have such a good view on where we're headed, on what are really going to be the priorities in 26 and 27. I appreciate you taking me through, hey, what is the reality of AI on the ground? What are other things supply chains are focused on to meet the needs of 2026, 2027? Because much like COVID is a distant memory that is fading by the day, I think all the volatility that we're needing to go through will fade, and we will really be in the future soon. And I really appreciate you making yourself available today. Thank you.
Absolutely. Such a fun conversation. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks for joining us on Moving the World, where we explore the ideas, people, and innovations reshaping how goods and the world move. If you liked this episode, be sure to follow, rate, and share the show. Until next time, keep moving forward.